They say home is where the heart is. But I don't remember leaving mine anywhere. My name is George, and I come from a house where silence was louder than love, where I love you sounded more like clean your room, and being noticed felt like being in trouble. I used to think I was invisible. Not like superhero invisible, just the kind of invisible where you walk into a room and nothing changes. A blurry boy in the corner of the frame. He's there, but almost not. I remember sitting in that room, the one at the end of the hall, with the door half closed and my questions tucked under the bed like monsters. I didn't understand her, my mom, what she wanted, what she needed. I just knew that I made her tired, and that maybe she didn't want me. That kind of thing stays with you, makes you smaller, makes your voice softer, until you're not even sure if you're supposed to exist. Like maybe you were a glitch, a forgotten comma in someone else's sentence. But here's the thing, nobody told me back then, even forgotten things can bloom. He's still quiet, but something in his eyes has changed. There's a weight, a wisdom, a light that didn't used to be there. I found out later, love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just someone staying. Sometimes it's your own voice saying, I'm still here, even when no one claps. I started writing letters I never sent, talking to myself like a friend, leaving little breadcrumbs of hope on days when the world felt too sharp. And one day, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't want to run from anymore. So if you're in the room, the quiet room, the one that feels like the world forgot you, I see you. You're not too much. You're not a burden. You're not a mistake. You're just waiting for the light to come back on. Maybe this is it. Even when it was hard, even when I didn't feel wanted, even when the room was too quiet. And if I can stay, so can you. Maybe we're all just looking for someone who won't leave when the light goes out. Maybe that someone is you. I write, mostly things I'll never read out loud, letters to people I haven't met, letters to the boy I used to be. The funny thing about silence is you start thinking it's your fault. But today something shifted. A bell chimes, the bakery door swings open, a young woman, maybe his age, maybe a little older, walks out. She carries a coffee, then pauses, looks at George's notebook. You a writer? I don't know. I think I'm just trying not to disappear. She smiles, sits on the other side of the bench without asking permission, like she already knows he won't say no. That's a good enough reason. They sit in silence for a moment, comfortable, the kind of silence George isn't used to. I don't even know her name, but for a moment she looked at me like I wasn't invisible, like I wasn't some walking question mark. We talked about books, about weird bakery smells, about how people smile without meaning it and how heavy that can feel. She didn't ask what I was doing with my life. She just asked what made me feel alive. Her name is Iris. She says it means messenger. I believe her. She didn't bring lightning or miracles, just presence. And that might be better. I still don't know where I'm going, but for the first time, I don't feel like I'm walking alone. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not fixing everything, not becoming fearless, but letting someone sit beside you while you figure it out. So here I am, out of the room, into the day, writing stories on bakery napkins and letting strangers become characters in my life. I'm still quiet, still a little weird, still me, but I think I'm becoming someone I wouldn't mind being around. Sometimes, it only takes one person to make you believe that maybe you were never too hard to love. Scene opens, a hallway, familiar and unfamiliar all at once. Faded wallpaper, a coat on the same hook it's always hung from. George stands in front of a closed door, not afraid, just bracing. You can feel the years in the air. It took me 4 months to write the letter, and another 3 to decide whether to send it. In the end, I didn't send it. I brought it with me, folded in my pocket like a second heartbeat. She opened the door. Still her. Still quiet eyes, tired shoulders, like life had been speaking too loudly for too long. They sit. The kitchen hasn't changed, neither has the silence, except now George isn't shrinking inside it. I don't want to blame you. I just need to say some things out loud. She doesn't stop him. She doesn't interrupt. For once, that feels like a gift. I told her everything I could. Not to hurt her, just to release the weight I'd carried since I was too small to name it. How I used to sit on my bed and wonder if I was the reason she always looked so tired. How I thought being quiet might make me easier to love. How her silence made me feel like I wasn't in the family, just around it. She looks at him, not away. There's something breaking in her eyes, but not the kind that wounds, the kind that softens. I didn't know. I really didn't know. I believed her. And it didn't undo the years, but it didn't have to. She told me things too. How she never knew how to show love because no one had ever shown her. How scared she was all the time. How parenting felt like holding your breath for 20 years straight. They sit in silence again, but this one feels different. Like 2 people finally sharing the same sky. I'm not here for an apology. I just want to be real with you. I'm learning to love myself. I just thought you should know who I've become. I'd like to know him too, if you'll let me. I didn't expect that, but it was enough. It was more than enough. Not a fix, not a movie ending, just a door that finally opened. And me, standing in it, not as a child begging to be seen, but as a man who had learned to see himself. Scene fades. George leaves the house. He stands on the porch, the sun is setting. He pulls the folded letter from his pocket, looks at it one last time, and lets it go. The wind carries it away. Sometimes healing doesn't mean going back to how things were. It means being strong enough to walk in as you are and still choose to stay soft. I never wanted to be a hero, just a safe place for someone like me. Someone still learning to believe they deserve to breathe without apologizing for it. So when they asked me to volunteer at the center, just hang out, be present, talk if you want or don't, I said yes. I didn't know who I was saying yes to, but I do now. A boy, maybe 14, hoodie pulled over his head, sitting in the corner of the room, sketching something in the margins of a worksheet. Eyes all in his Luca. He hasn't said much, but I recognize the way he takes up as little space as possible, the way he disappears while sitting in plain sight. That used to be me. George walks over, doesn't sit too close, just enough, leave space. You draw? Sometimes? Me too. Used to draw whole worlds no one ever saw. They sit in quiet, the good kind. He didn't need a lecture. He didn't need advice. He needed someone to show up and not flinch at his silence. So that's what I did. Time passes. Days, weeks. Slowly, Luca starts showing George his sketches. They talk more about space, about music, about how weird it is to feel too much and not enough all at once. One day he asks me, "Did you always know who you were?" I laugh. No, but I knew who I didn't want to become, and I figured the rest out from there. He nodded like he understood that better than most grown-ups I've met. You are not a mistake. You were not born to be silent. You are not invisible. Even on the days when no one looks at you, you still shine. Cut to Luca watching him, not saying anything, just seeing him. I don't know if I changed his life, but I know he changed mine. He reminded me why I stayed, why I healed, why I kept writing letters to the boy I used to be. Because sometimes those letters find someone else's hands. Someone still becoming someone like Luca. Scene fades. George and Luca walking home together. Not saying much, just being. Sometimes you don't have to be the light. Sometimes it's enough to sit in the dark and whisper to someone, "You're not alone." They called my name. He steps up to the mic. His palms sweat. He unfolds a worn page from his notebook. His breath shakes. "Hi, I'm George, and for a long time, I didn't think I mattered." I grew up in a house that had doors but not always warmth. A family that fed me but didn't know how to see me, especially her, my mom. I thought love meant being invisible, being easy, being quiet, being less. I spent most of my childhood in my room, learning to disappear without dying. But then, I started writing letters, not to anyone, just to the version of me who needed someone to say, "You matter. You're not too much. You belong." I never meant to share those letters, but a kid named Luca changed that. He reminded me that there are still so many of us waiting for someone to say, "I see you. I stayed too." So this is me staying, speaking. Not because it's easy, but because maybe you needed to hear this as much as I needed to say it. If you're in this room and you've ever wondered if the world made a mistake when it made you, let me say this, as someone who once sat in the back and never raised his hand, you are not a mistake. You are still becoming, and you are so wanted. I didn't fix the world that night, but I lit a small light, and sometimes that's all someone needs, to know that one voice can echo and become a lifeline. There is nothing louder than a quiet person finally saying what they were never allowed to. Her name is Eli. I met her at a bookshop. I was reaching for a dog-eared copy of Rilke, and she was holding a coffee like it was made of glass. She smiled, not like she wanted something, but like she already understood. I told her my story, not all at once, but piece by piece, like handing someone shards and hoping they don't bleed. She didn't flinch, didn't try to fix it. She just listened and said, "That must have been heavy to carry alone." And for the first time, it felt lighter. For the moment, she'd realize I wasn't enough, but she stayed. Through the quiet days, through the overthinking, through the moments when I shut down and needed someone to knock patiently on the walls I didn't know I still had. And one night I asked her, "Why? Why me?" "Because you made it through things that would have crushed most people, and you're still gentle. That's rare, that's beautiful, that's enough." And I believed her. Not all at once, but enough to stay, enough to let her stay. I didn't know I could be loved like this. Not in spite of everything, but because of it. Real love doesn't rescue you. It finds you, exactly where you are, and walks beside you until you believe you're worth the journey. Dear boy in the room, with the quiet heart and the loud thoughts, I see you. I know how long you've waited for someone to knock on your door and say, "You matter. You are not a mistake." So let me be that someone, even if it's just me, years later, writing back through time. I remember how you used to press your hands against your chest, wondering if what beat inside you was worth anything. I remember how you watched your mother's eyes for a kind of love that never came. I remember how you believed that silence meant shame, that being good meant being invisible. But I need you to know, you were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who forgot how to look. And you were never hard to love. You were just waiting for someone gentle enough to try. Guess what? You made it. Not into perfection, not into someone with all the answers, but into someone who finally stopped apologizing for the way his heart beats. You write now, you speak, you help kids like you, ones who sit in corners and draw galaxies because the real world never felt safe. You even found love, not the kind that saves you, but the kind that stands beside you and says, "I see it too." You're not broken, you're blooming. You're building a life that feels like home, not just for you, but for others too. I'm proud of you, and I forgive you for the years you thought you had to disappear just to be loved. You don't have to be small anymore. You don't have to hide. Come out of the room. The world is softer than you think, and you are more beautiful than you ever believed.